My friend brought it home for me, put it on the back of his trailer. We had to haul it up with a winch. When we got it to the house, he said, "Get up on there and drive it off." I said, "No, we can just roll it down." He said, "This might be the only time you ever get to ride it." So I got on it, he pushed it off, and I rolled it down into the barn, and there it sat. It was rusty, it was dusty, it leaked oil, had a cracked block, had major problems with everything. Everything was dented, beaten, and busted. But it was mine. I paid $500 for it. Way too much. Spent a lot of time cleaning it up. At first, I started something that got everything going. I took pictures so I would know how to put it back together again. This is how it looked when I brought it home. This is how everything actually fit together. All the bolts, nuts, and pieces. Yeah, that was a battery that came with it. It was in rough shape. That oil can, that was my friend for the next couple of weeks. I'd go out every day, put some oil on the things, tap them with a hammer. That's pretty much all I did. Yep. It was complicated. There were a lot of linkages on it. This was the cultivator system. The ignition system. Ain't it a beauty? Everything on here worked. The engine didn't run, but it had other problems. But this part here, the ignition system worked. Had a PTO flat belt drive. That was kind of a cool thing. I actually used it a couple of times. This is a shot of the rear wheel. That's my compressor sitting up on the shelf behind it. Blacksmith shop worked out pretty well for this. I had plenty of room to work on the tractor. I could take it all apart in there, and everything was just fine. This is the other wheel. You can see that I've got the engine pulled off by now. This is the back end from a different angle. Here's the thing that took the most work. With the block cracked, I had to take everything out of the block before I could weld it. That meant pistons, rings, sleeves, everything. Pulled it all down. I didn't take pictures of me welding the block, and I should have, but that was almost a week in itself. Preheating the block, welding it inch at a time, nickel rod on cast iron. It held. Farmall B's have a problem. This side here is all water jacket. Water surrounds the sleeves on the cylinders, and this big plate here has a big bunch of water in behind it. So whenever anybody doesn't put antifreeze in them, that freezes and it cracks the block right across there. There's a weak spot in the casting. Well, I got the block welded up, and now I'm starting to reassemble it. It was quite the job. Taking out the crankshaft was one of the most miserable things. All the seals have to be replaced. It's ugly, but it worked. Now, strip down, paint, and reassemble. Now that I knew I could get the engine running, it was time to work on the rest of the frame. There was a lot of work to do on it. Everything was rusted shut. Very few things actually moved. I wanted to save the bolts because they were all special bolts. Farmall likes to use specific bolts for specific tasks. They were certain length, certain threads, certain pitch. Everything had to be just the same. Some of the stuff I replaced, like the bolts that held on the drawbar. They were pretty sad shape, and I didn't want to trust them. Bell housing with a throwout bearing. I always think that's something looking through that little hole. It's actually I always think this thing's something looking through that hole. It's actually the jack stand, just the pin in it. I made this overhead beam so I could use a come-along to lift the engine off. Built this frame out of the old clothesline and some fence posts. That's the front axle. This is more bits and pieces. Front tires, gas tank, fuel lines, clutch pedals, ignition system. Another look from a different angle. It was a mess in the blacksmith shop for a long time. But gradually, I started getting things so that they look better. Took the old wheels, wire brushed them, cleaned them up, and painted them. Looked pretty good. Ryan was helping me the whole time. This is him pounding out the rim on the front wheel. And me finishing up the job. That's the old welder that I still have. Had to weld up some worn spots in the bottom of this bull gear pan. This was filled with oil, and evidently it hadn't had oil in it for a long time because it had a big hole in the bottom. Now I'm painting the wheels. They were in rough shape. They weren't that smooth to begin with. This was a big stamping, but it had rusted a lot over the years. And it took a bit of work to get it cleaned up. I got the engine block done. Most of the stuff assembled on it. And I'm painting it. Got the oil pan mounted on the thing. It's getting ready to go back in the tractor. There's the frame, wire brushed, painted, got primer coat on it. Now we're going to wheel it out of the garage, wheel it out of the blacksmith shop. First time I've seen light of day in a couple of months. Ryan's helping. It's hard to steer because the front end linkage isn't hooked up. I'm kicking the wheel back and forth to make it turn. Well, we got it pushed out of the shed. Yep, always a picture. Lydia's taking the picture of me and my son and our hard work going into making a tractor. Okay, we've got the engine assembled, ignition on it, all the bits and pieces put together. Doesn't have the hood on it, doesn't have the front grille, but it's good enough to test start the engine. Now I'm jump starting it with the truck. Gonna see if it turns over and actually runs. Well, can you tell it worked? Well, can you tell it worked? I am rather happy. Right after it started, the number 2 sleeve cracked. Started spitting water out of the muffler, and I drove it back into the blacksmith shop where it sat for another 2 weeks while I found a sleeve, re-sleeved the engine, put it back together again. No pictures, just me working away. But I got it together and it's running. Yeah, I'm happy. Now we gotta get ready for the big day. We're gonna take it for a ride. When the tractor came, I had an extra seat. I don't remember where I got the seat from, but I had an extra seat. So I put the extra seat onto the back of the tractor. B ends had the seat set off to one side, kind of like the A, but not exactly. So with the seat set off to one side, I was able to put the other seat on the other side of the tractor. That way, 2 of us could ride. And ride we did. Around the house, down the street, back to the house. Running like a champ. Both of us are real proud of our work. Time for the Memorial Day parade. We both got on a tractor. We're going to head to town.
This video is not to be viewed by anyone under the age of 13 in the U.S. or 16 in the European Union without the express written permission of the parents or the legal guardians of the underage person. Such written permission must be on file at the local government entity in charge of enforcing the rules and regulations established by the FTC. Anyone violating these terms is admitting by default that they hold harmless the owners and operators of this channel. Any and all questions should be addressed to your local branch of the FTC.